The Russo-Georgian War did not begin out of the blue. The Kremlin had been preparing for a full-scale invasion of Georgia for several months. That's according to a Georgian commander during the August 2008 events, Mamuka Mamulashvili. This was shortly before the regular units of the Russian army were pulled into the territory of unrecognized South Ossetia. At the end of July, several hundred so-called volunteers and Cossacks started provoking the Georgians.
Провоцировать начали так называемые миротворческие войска России, которые были расположены, у них было несколько баз.
The so-called Russian peacekeeping forces, deployed at several bases in Chernvalsk region of Georgia, started provocations. And in principle, they started provocations a few weeks before real clashes began. By the time the war was declared, the border with Georgia was crossed by several thousand armored vehicles. And basically, civilians were subjected to attacks. On the night of August 8th, after numerous shelling in Georgian territory, Tbilisi decided to restore the constitutional order in the conflict zone. Russia responded by announcing the beginning of the so-called peace enforcement operation. It started carrying out a series of airstrikes. On August 9th, Russian planes attacked Gori. Dozens of civilians were killed. A member of the opposition movement in St. Petersburg, Olga Kurnosova, recalls how the propaganda television in TV was fabricating the video evidence of civilian casualties. I remember very well the footage of the bombing of Tskhinvali shown by Russian TV. Although my friends wrote to me that this was actually the bombardment of Gori by Russian forces. Then there was the first round of this great power tantrum. In particular, it was almost the expulsion of Georgians from Russia. In late August, the Kremlin recognized the independence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. In turn, Georgia adopted a resolution where it registered these territories as occupied and Russia as the occupier, followed by rupturing of diplomatic relations. I think that for the Kremlin, it was a test of the pen. First of all, Putin tries all the time and then looks whether there's a reaction or not. This tactic is used everywhere in international relations inside the country. When something is done and when society does not react, it means it can be continued. Therefore, it is very important to immediately slap it on the wrist and define uncrossable boundaries. If the EU and the US had taken a tough stance during the Russian aggression against Georgia, then there would be no war in Donbass, nor the annexation of Crimea, believe some observers. All attempts in the civilized world to wage a war of aggression must be stopped. It has to be primarily understood by politicians in Europe. Meanwhile, the occupied regions of Ukraine and Georgia are increasingly sinking into economic decay. Resorts in Crimea and Abkhazia are empty, and the industry of Donbass and South Ossetia is destroyed. Having become dependent on the so-called Russian donation needle, they've become a bargaining chip in the political game the Kremlin is trying to impose on the world.